So, recently, I've been really into the idea of drawing things that are inspired by the real world. I'm not sure about how to put it, but I think I want to explore my creativity and see what I can create from things that feel closer to my reality, I guess. Sorry, I think that's the best I can do to explain what I think has been going on in my mind. And by the way, that's what made me draw the Chochi inspired character that I didn't really like, but you can check that on my previous video if you want. And yeah, so last time I drew a character inspired by a photo that I took. This time, I made a post on Instagram asking people to leave a comment so I could pick a photo from someone's feed and use it as inspiration for a future illustration. And here we are, delivering what we promised. Okay, so let's start from the sketch. I usually start planning the illustration on the sketch stage, and as I make progress, I see if my plans are going to work or not, and usually I change a lot of things on the rendering stage. This time, the photo that I chose to use as inspiration was a Zoro cosplay. I really liked the color palette and how it wasn't 100% following the original design of the character, so at the same time I could recognize the character. I saw the personal touches that made it unique and interesting to draw. I missed the dramatic rendering that I used to do, so when I was searching for references on Pinterest, I looked for something that had an interesting lighting to help me work on that. I feel like my recent illustrations have been very flat and kind of boring, although they seem to be cozier and more friendly than the more rendered ones, which are usually more dramatic. Well, at least I can say that I achieved my goal of learning how to make more friendly illustrations. Now, one thing that concerned me about the Pinterest reference was that it was a bust-up portrait, which meant I wouldn't be drawing the purple and pink details that I liked so much. But fret not, because I had the brilliant idea of transferring those colors to other elements of the illustration, which were the eyes and the background. Yay! That way, the entire illustration would be inspired by the colors of the cosplay. Line art is something that I usually do only on the character, and this time it was no different, especially having in mind that I would blur the background elements anyways. This time I used the same brush from my previous line art video because I wanted to see if I would be able to make a more dramatic illustration with it. I made that brush to use in more cozy illustrations, comics, and slice of life pieces because it basically had no difference in opacity and size and seemed to be more fit to those kinds of purposes. But since I really enjoyed using it, I decided to try it on an illustration with a different vibe from the ones I had in mind for it. And yeah, the amount of times I undo the strokes with this brush is probably lower than when I use my usual brush, so I think this brush takes a lot of pressure off of me when I'm making the line art of my illustrations. And because of that, I wonder if this is going to become my new usual line art brush. To block the colors, I started by painting the overall shape of the character with the skin color using the lasso tool. I used the same technique to color the other elements, each one in a different layer clipped to the skin layer. And every time I start coloring my drawings, I try to separate and organize the different elements in a way that make them easy to edit in case I need. I wanted the background to have some kind of color contrast with the character, especially having in mind the colors of the cosplay. By the way, these aren't the final colors, I just put them there to see if they would minimally work and not look too contrasting with the character, because I wanted contrast, but I also wanted some kind of harmony so it wouldn't look weird. And in the end, I wasn't sure about the background. I wanted to be more pink and purple, but I decided to take a break from it and start working on something else. With the flat color set, I started adding some details. In this stage of the rendering, I used only normal layers and picked colors that were close to the elements I was painting, as if there were no environmental influences to change the hues. And Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not the most studied person when it comes to the environment influence on objects and subjects, so the way I'm doing things here might not be the most recommended in case you're looking for a reference to study. I started my rendering like this because I knew that the other layers I was going to add would help put the character into the environment, so now I was more focused on adding specific details and shadows to each element of the character. The second part of the rendering was basically doing the smallest thing I could to put the character into the environment, which was adding a multiply layer on top of the character and erasing some parts to give that tree shadow effect. I followed my reference to have an idea of some erasing spots, then once I was done, I used some Gaussian blur on the layer. Once the base of the character was done, I started working on the background to make it fit the character. I painted the sky with a gradient using the color palette from the cosplay. And then I tested some colors for the trees and decided to officially go for the pink. It matched the eyes of the character and really complemented the green hair and blue outfit. I then started painting some details on the trees, just worrying about making them look more 3D. I didn't really worry about making them look super crisp and detailed because I was going to blur them anyways. We are almost done, I promise. The third stage of rendering was about adding highlights. To do that, I just needed one layer on add mode, and then I highlighted the eyes and the golden accessories. Now it's finally time for the last rendering stage. This is definitely my favorite part of every illustration because it's when I can really transform it. It's a complete freestyle moment because all I do is test different combinations of layers and colors to see what I like. And this time I used an overlay layer to add more contrast between the highlighted areas and the shaded areas. I added more lighting details like rim light, sunlight, and hair glow on add layers. Then I drew some strands of hair to make it look more dynamic and added some highlights to them as well. And last but not least, I added some classic sparkles. And this was the final result.